Showdown after the throwdown. President Obama inviting the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to a White House event this week. Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel will also address the group next month. But this follows an all-out assault on the chamber, which isn't backing health care reform. Are you starting to see a pattern here?
A lot of the banks and big financial firms don't like the idea of a consumer agency very much. In fact, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is spending millions on an ad campaign to kill it. The doctor may look at the reimbursement system and say to himself, you know what, I make a lot more money if I take this kid's tonsils out.
Excess greed, excess compensation, excess risk-taking have all made us vulnerable.
Well, the president needs businesses to create jobs, so will all of these attacks backfire? Historian Jane Hampton Cook says they could if he's not careful. Jane, good to have you back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You know, Jane, what makes this unique is prior presidents would target an industry here and there, whether it was JFK going after the steel industry or Bill Clinton going for a while after the HMOs. But this is unusual in terms of the broad breadth of the attacks. What do you make of them?
Well, I think that's true. There is a broad stroke approach here to business. And you're right. You know, most presidents will target a specific crisis or a specific industry if they think it will have an adverse effect on the public. So, you know, JFK went after the steel industry when they wanted to raise steel prices. But that was very selective, very narrow. And you have a broader brush approach here. And I think it's very reminiscent of FDR, who historians look back and say he had a very cool relationship with corporations and business. And so I think there's definitely a risk here of a backlash later on in his presidency because of some of the broad strokes she's taking, specifically with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who represents a lot of businesses.
Well, the president, obviously every president needs a villain and someone to attack to say, you're not seeing the light, you're not seeing my light. But what does the president risk attacking so many from the business community and trying to pull an FDR? Because you're right, FDR did that. But he always stayed very popular in the eyes of the American people, if for no other reason than that the Depression ensued and ensued and ensued, and then we had a World War. So many would argue he stayed artificially high in that environment. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that's true. I mean, he certainly called Wall Street greedy, and he did kind of keep a general tone about it. But he didn't specifically attack, you know, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the small business world. And I think that that's what you're seeing here. And it makes sense that a group like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce would state their opinions on policies that they disagree with. So I don't think that's a huge surprise. But there are so many people who are, you know, invested in the small business world and in the corporate sector too, that I just think it is a risk that he's taking. And I don't think he probably, I think it all stems from his government philosophy, the government regulation, the government expansion. I really think it's just rooted in his philosophy of government, which was very similar, you know, to Franklin Roosevelt.
But, you know, sometimes this can work for you if you create a villain and say they're the reason why you're not seeing change or they're the obstacle to change. And they eventually can be intimidated to the point that they sign on, the drug makers, and they're signing on to health care under the threat of bigger penalties if they didn't. That sometimes you can get what you wish by being tougher than most people want, right?
Well, that's true, and it does create a narrative to have a villain, big business. I mean, JFK used that back in the 60s, but then he also turned around and did a tax cut because he wanted to court the business community. That was a huge part of the tax cut proposal that JFK proposed in 1962.
So you're saying, Jane, that he would have to do something like that, this president, to woo business back, right?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And that's what JFK did that was so effective. And he had a little bit of a villain there, but he definitely courted them and made sure he kept it in check and in balance.
And Bill Clinton offered a number of business-related tax cuts, even after raising taxes in the upper income. So you have to wheel and deal, right?
That's right.
All right, Jane.
That's the way it works.
Jane Hampton Cook, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.